Good morning, everybody. It's 10:02, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Assistant Secretary Bahano, can you please call the roll?
Chairman Greg Smith.
Here.
Board members Roland Barrera, Barbara Canales, attending by WebEx.
Here.
Okay.
Judge Canales, we need to see you to take your vote or to take your tally as being present. Judge Canales, do you have your camera on?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I am
There.
walking.
Okay, great, thank you. Brent Chesney. Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Gil Hernandez.
Here.
Michael Hunter. Billy Lerma.
Here.
John Martinez.
Here.
Ben Molina.
Present.
Jim Needham.
Here.
Mr. Needham, do you have your camera on so we can count you as present?
There you go. I'm traveling.
Okay, so,
I'm a non-voting member.
okay, so WebEx. Sylvia Oliver.
Here.
Ms. Oliver, do you have your camera on so we can count you as present?
I'm trying. You see me now? You see me now? No?
No, not yet.
I'm trying. Not working.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we see you now.
Okay.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mike Pesley. Dr. Lori Turner is absent today. Executive Director Peter Zanoni.
Present.
The quorum of the board is present to conduct the meeting, and Mr. Barrera is present as well.
Thank you. Next item is public comment. Would anybody like to make public comment? Mr. Gardner, you're first.
Morning, everybody. Jay Gardner, 3922 Sweet Bay Drive. I'm also the chairman of the ISAC committee. Good morning, Zanoni. Down here carrying some marching orders from the ISAC committee on the island. Obviously, you know, we need to renew the TIRZ number 2 into the future. We passed many votes about that. I don't think anybody's really against it, but I'd just like to stress that we've got to get that thing extended. That way we don't get caught with our pants down again. I'd like to thank the city staff for chasing the FEMA money and getting us over that hump, morning, Mayor, and getting that down the road. We need to get buy-in from Nueces County, and I also heard a rumor that Del Mar was interested in getting back on board with this too, so I'd like to chase that, have y'all chase that for sure. Now the Packery is being repaired, we have a long list of projects actually that we've been vetting. Some of those projects are maintenance projects like the dredging and monitoring, and some of them are old six-pack projects that have to be yet constructed. So, plus we've got a long list of other projects that ISAC has been vetting that will support the TIRZ number 2 once we get that renewed. So anyway, just again, thank you all for your time and efforts in getting that renewed, and let's get down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. And would anybody else like to make public comment? Mr. Duffley.
Good morning. Charles Duffley, 112 Lance Lane, Victoria, Texas. Many of you know that I represent a number of the largest landowners on the island, And, you know, one of the things I definitely want to make sure that you guys know, we appreciate everything that you guys are doing for the island. You know, one of the things that's interesting, I've got, you know, a strong relationship with Greg and, you know, a lot of conversations, and many of you are aware that, you know, one of the reasons we got the FEMA money was truly because Greg and I one day were talking when we were told by the previous city manager that, you know, there was no money coming from FEMA. And I've got a strong relationship with Michael Cloud. We reached out to Michael. Michael, you know, said that doesn't sound right. He reached out to FEMA, and obviously I give, again, city staff, you know, and you guys just tremendous praise, because if we wouldn't have made those actions, as you guys know, that money, what we were being told by the previous city manager is that there was no money. And, you know, come to find out, you know, it was just a miss. And again, I give Peter and staff tremendous credit for pushing that through. And the reason why I say all that this morning is because, as you guys know, as you look at trying to come in and amend or extend this TIRZ, without it, we would be sitting on a $14 million bill right now. And how would we be getting the repairs done for the Packery? So I also look at this as an opportunity. And Peter and I have had a number of conversations that as we grow this TIRZ, as the island grows, many of you are aware that we had over $400 million in a 380 agreement on the island. That 380 agreement is now gone, and we need to make sure that we have the tools to incentivize development that is truly a public-private opportunity. So that's what I'd like to share with you guys this morning. So strongly encourage you guys to obviously look at amending and renewing the TIRZ too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dufflin. Ms. Bahano, do we have any written comments?
We do not.
Thank you. Okay, next item of business is the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 20th and December 14th, 2021.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The motion passes on there. Next item is the financial report.
Good morning, Board and Chairman. Heather Hurlbert, Director of Finance. Next slide, please. So we are looking at the financials for the period ending December 31st, 2021. That is the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year. Our beginning fund balance is an unaudited fund balance. We're finalizing our audit within the next month or so. We do not anticipate that there will be any significant changes to that beginning fund balance of $4.4 million. Our revenues to date are $2.3 million. Just a reminder that this is property taxes primarily is what the revenue is made up of, and most of those, the majority of that is usually collected by the end of January, and it will be reflected in the February financial statements. We have not made a debt payment this year yet out of the TIRZ, and so right now we have an ending fund balance of $6.7 million. In addition to the fund balance, we do have a bond reserve of $1.5 million, which will be available to roll back into fund balance once the debt is paid off in September of this year. And then there is a reserve maintenance of $500,000. Next slide, please. So then looking at what has been allocated to CIP projects, we have a total of $16.8 million that is budgeted for the projects. We have expenditures of $5.8 million year period to date across the life of these projects, leaving a balance available for the projects of a little over $11 million. Those projects are, we have the Park Road 22 bridge, we have the FEMA restoration, which is the city's portion of that, the matching to the FEMA grants. We do have about $4 million budgeted for available for dredging, $71,000 available for monitoring, and then we do have an additional about $15,000 that's in our reserve appropriation, which can be allocated to any project. That does conclude my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pusley, is that, it's coming up Harris, IT people, things aren't matched up, but anyway. Mr. Pusley.
Thank you, sir. My question to Peter and staff, what's the plans on the dredging at Packery? Are we going to wait till the repairs are made and then do the dredging? Is that
Right, that's the
plan?
That's the plan, Councilman, yeah, so we'll get all the revetment, all the repairs done, and then under a separate contract, we have to come back and do the dredging.
Okay, so it'll be a separate contract?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to our next item. Amy, we don't have an executive session, do we? It says placeholder.
The executive session was put on as a placeholder in
Yeah.
case we get into legal questions and we want to go back.
Okay. Okey-doke. So, having done, we'll go to item 4, presentation items. Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone number 2, option to extend term. Heather, you back up?
I'm back up. It's me again. Next slide, please. So what we're going to discuss today within this presentation is, a review of what the original purpose of the TIRZ was, the permissibility of term and boundary revisions, our future revenue, what we're projecting future revenue for, identified needs, things that have already been discussed about what the needs, what the needs of the TIRZ are, looking at how we move forward with the future project and financing plan, and then what the next steps are. Next slide, please. And one more, please. Okay. So to review, the TIRZ boundaries do not encompass the whole island. So the TIRZ boundary is primarily along the Park Road 22 corridor and to the east up to the water. It does encompass the area around Packery Channel, and it does go slightly to the west where the former Schlitterbahn site was, up to along Commodore and Aquarius and back around near the Whitecap area. So those are the boundaries of the TIRZ. There is a lot of the commercial development that is included in the TIRZ along with some residential development. But when the TIRZ was formed, there you see these kind of donut holes in there. Those were some of the primarily residential areas that were excluded in the boundaries of the original boundaries of the TIRZ. Next slide, please. So the original purpose of the TIRZ, it was created in 2000 to support the local share needed for the North Padre Island Storm Damage Reduction and Environmental Restoration Project, also known as Packery Channel. It was funded through 100% of taxes generated on the increment above the base year from the City of Corpus Christi, Nueces County, Del Mar, where their participation ended in 2011, and the Nueces County Hospital District. The current TIRZ is set to expire on December 31st, 2022. So just to review what funds within the TIRZ can be used for, it is for programs or other projects that benefit the zone but could not occur but for creation of the zone. And those programs and other projects include public infrastructure, public improvements, capital maintenance of public infrastructure and improvements, and reimbursement to private parties that make improvements to benefit the TIRZ. This is not an all-inclusive. There are other allowable uses, but these are the primary allowable uses. So the great thing about a TIRZ is that it basically uses the revenue generated in the zone to fund projects that benefit and improve the properties within the zone. So it is a kind of a self-funding mechanism. As you put investment into the zone, it creates more revenue, which then can be invested back in the zone. Next slide, please. So the project and financing plan has been amended several times during the life of the TIRZ. And so this is a summary of those projects that were included in the project and financing plan. So the primary purpose was for the construction of the Packery Channel. Along with that, there is a group of projects referred to as a six-pack, which included parking lots, restrooms, and other amenities along the Packery Channel. A participation in the construction of Park Road 22 Bridge, pedestrian improvements on the island, dredging and beach nourishment, and that was primarily included in the original project. The periodic survey of channel conditions and the shoreline, which is the monitoring that's done on a regular basis. The TIRZ is going to fund the city's portion of repairs due to the damage from Hurricane Harvey and Hannah, and then a feasibility study for the TIRZ continuation, which has already been completed. Next slide, please. Next slide. So there have been some questions on the permissibility of the term, And so Texas Tax Code 311 is the statute that defines how tax increment zones are created, how they can be extended, and what they can be used for. So per section 311.007, the extension of a zone does not need to meet the initial designation criteria set forth in section 311.005 and can be extended by the governing body by providing notice and holding a hearing. So once a zone has been created, as they evolve, sometimes they don't have to necessarily meet that original criteria in which it was formed. As long as it's existing, it can be extended. We did reach out to outside legal counsel and David Ortiz with Brown and Ortiz, which is a San Antonio firm that specializes in land use planning and development, provided the opinion dated September 23rd, 2021, that the TIRZ could be extended using the steps defined in 311.007. In addition, the legislation adopted by the Texas legislature in 2011 broadened the eligible uses of TIRZ, and this economic development tool has been used very successfully across the state to support and encourage economic development. Next slide, please. So boundaries for the TIRZ actually can be amended at any time. The parcels just need to be contiguous to the current TIRZ, so you can't go and pick and choose parcels outside of the TIRZ boundary that aren't adjacent to the TIRZ boundary. And if the boundaries are revised to include new parcels, the parcels would have a base year of the year that they're added. So they don't go back to the original base year from 2020. It would be the base year of whenever they're added to the TIRZ. And you can also exclude properties, but then if at a future date you decide to pull them back in again, then that increment will be lost that has been built over the time. Next slide, please. One more. So looking at the current revenue within the TIRZ, currently 100% of the tax increment above the base year is contributed to by the TIRZ by all participating taxing entities. So currently it is the City of Corpus Christi, Nueces County, and the Hospital District. As I said, Del Mar met their obligation as of 2011. So our base year generates about a little over $500,000 in city tax revenue in fiscal year 22, and that was allocated to general fund allocations, street maintenance, and to debt service. So our general fund services include, but are not limited to, public safety, parks, library, code enforcement, animal control, and all those functions within the city that are funded through our general fund. So as we look forward, we do recommend that a contribution less of 100% for all taxing entities be considered to allow for additional funds to go into the general fund, since we do have such a large growth over our base year and do have a good amount of revenue, which we'll talk about in just a second coming into the TIRZ. Next slide. So even before we extend the TIRZ, we do have significant funding that is available within the TIRZ, and I talked about a little bit of that during the financial statements. So in fiscal year 22, our ending fund balance is budgeted at $7.8 million after our final bond payment is made. So that is available, $7.8 million that can be allocated to capital projects or anything that is allowed by the project and financing plan. The bond reserve of $1.5 million will be released after the final bond payment, so that's in addition to that $7.8 million. And then we do have a maintenance reserve of about $500,000 that is available for maintenance activities within the TIRZ. So in addition to that, the CIP fund has a balance of $4 million available for dredging once the repairs to the channel infrastructure is completed. So I think if I remember correctly, to dredge the channel is about $2 million, give or take a few $100,000 here and there. And so we actually have enough money set aside for 2 cycles of dredging based off of current prices. Next slide. So looking at our current revenue, in 2002, it was the first year that the TIRZ was collected revenue above the base year, and so total revenue was almost $164,000. And so in 2022, our total revenue for the TIRZ is budgeted at $5.11 million. So that is quite an increase. As a matter of fact, it's about 2,000, almost 2,500% increase in revenue from 2002 to 2022. And so the TIRZ is operating as it should. It's building that revenue, and those investments have gone back into the TIRZ. So just looking back over the last 5 years, the TIRZ experienced a 29.6% increase in tax revenue. So looking at the chart, I did break out between what total revenue was and what tax revenue was, because we have had fluctuations within our investment revenue. Unfortunately, we can't invest in risky items, and we have a very short list of those things that we can invest in. So if you look at our average rate of return between 2019 versus 2022, we were receiving on average a 2.31% return on our investments in 2019. In 2022, our return on investments is 0.03%. So there's quite a difference. We are seeing those increases. The interest rate's creeping up just slightly, but it'll be a while before we get back to that possibly 2.3%. Next slide, please. So then looking forward, we used a very conservative modeling for growth. And so this 5-year period reflects about a 17.2% increase in tax revenue over the 5-year period. Like I said, we try always, when we forecast forward, we always use very conservative numbers because we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So we have very conservative numbers in here. So even at a 75% contribution level, and I forgot to mention along the way is that we have approached Del Mar and had conversations with them about possibly rejoining the TIRZ. They said that is something that they definitely would consider. If they do rejoin the TIRZ, their properties would go back to a zero basis. So it's like we are starting over with them because they only contributed to 2011. And so if you see in these charts reflected that their increment will build slowly, but after 5 years, their contribution could be about $163,000 based off the conservative growth factors at a 75% contribution. So even at a 75% contribution, our first year revenue into the TIRZ would be about $3.5 million. So still significant money that we could do some great projects with, do those reinvestments back into the TIRZ. On up through 2017, which would be at about $4.19 million. Then at a 50% contribution, we are looking at about a $2.3 million contribution into the TIRZ, ranging up to about a $2.8 million in 2027. So still significant money that would be coming into the TIRZ, with the difference going into the general fund for general services. Next slide, please. One more. So just to recap again, the allowable uses are primarily for public infrastructure, public improvements, and that type of development that benefits the zone as a whole. Next slide, please. So some of the items that we identified just based off of conversations within the TIRZ boards, conversations from ISAC, and just in general, is looking at the ongoing Packery Channel maintenance. So that would be something that we would probably want to set either a percentage of funds or a set amount each year aside to make sure that we have proper reserves to maintain the channel going forward. Looking at improved amenities within the TIRZ, looking at parks, looking at other things within the TIRZ that would benefit the TIRZ residents, or the island residents. Looking at stormwater, water, and wastewater infrastructure, there's still some of those areas that don't have it readily available that we could look at either participating in the extension of or doing that build out and having it there ready for development. Looking at mobility, connectivity, and walkability, I know that's a thing that's come up several times on the fact that the island is somewhat disjointed and it's not a walkable or connected area. Looking at environmental conservation and preservation, looking at quality entertainment and retail infrastructure. That's one of the things that has been lacking on the island, and looking at water circulation and quality. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are just some ideas and points for consideration as we start talking about what we would like to include in that project and financing plan. Next slide, please. One more. So the project and financing plan, so that is basically the governing body of the TIRZ. It tells us what we can use the money for. It can assign up to what limits the money can be used for, what dollar amounts it can be used for. And so the project and financing plan really should be a living document. It should be updated on a regular basis to reflect the current needs of the TIRZ area. And the plan can be amended at any time with recommendation of the TIRZ board and approval by City Council. Next slide, please. So building off of those identified needs, some of the proposed projects that we would bring forward for consideration, and like I said, this is not inclusive, this is not all inclusive, but this is open for recommendations from the board, is again looking at that Packery Channel and at the annual capital maintenance, looking at mobility projects, possibly funding a mobility study, and then from that study coming up with a prioritized list of projects to use the TIRZ funding for. Infrastructure improvements, again, looking at a multi-year plan, prioritizing those projects, and either funding them directly through the TIRZ or reimbursing developers who are on the island and who will construct those. And then looking at a revenue sharing program for master plan development. And so this would be for those developments that are coming in and looking at a larger larger view. This is not just, 30 or 40 houses. This would be a master plan type development. And we just threw out $100 million, but that number could be either adjusted up or down at the recommendation of the board, with significant investments in the island. And so, this would help meet those economic development goals and objectives for the island. And what we would propose is that the revenue share would be an amount less than the revenue generated by the increment from the improvements. So if the improvements are worth $1,000 and $100 in taxes are paid, then we would only possibly consider sharing $50 of that, so that a portion of that would still go back into the general TIRZ, and the revenue sharing would not pull from other funds generated by the TIRZ. So it would be more like what we do in the downtown TIRZ, which is project specific. So you get a revenue share of that revenue that you're generating with your development. Next slide, please. One more. So looking at the next steps, what we are proposing is that we continue the discussion with Del Mar and Oasis County about the participation. But if both choose not to participate, there's really not a benefit extending the TIRZ. The power of the TIRZ is that it multiplies money, basically, because it has our tax revenue along with our other taxing entities. And so if neither of the taxing entities decide to participate, then we would just recommend that we not extend the TIRZ, and those funds just go back to the general fund and be allocated from there for specific projects. We would need to draft an updated project and financing plan with input from the appropriate stakeholders and the TIRZ board. And then the TIRZ board would need to make a motion recommending the extension of the TIRZ to the city council. And so we would like to move more sooner than later on this. I think that there is a lot of momentum in wanting to extend the TIRZ. And so we propose that these steps would happen over the next several months. And the reason behind that is that we really would like to have a decision made on whether or not the TIRZ would be extended before we hit budget. And so by following this timeline, we would have the extension done in the May-June time frame with the public hearing and first and second reading of the TIRZ ordinance. Then we would bring the project and financing plan to the TIRZ board and the city council for approval, and then amend the interlocal agreements with Nueces County. And then if Del Mar does decide to participate, then we would enter into an interlocal agreement with them. By following this timeline, that would get us in place so that we could then make sure that we're including what needs to be included in next year's budget. This is not a hard, fast thing, but we felt like this would be a good plan to make sure that those steps are taken. We can always come back and amend the budget. It's just easier to go ahead and include it in the original budget so we don't have to amend. So that it does conclude my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Mr. Pusley?
So Heather, it's my understanding the hospital district will not be participating. By state law, they've been excluded.
That is correct. They are not eligible to participate.
And Del Mar pulled out in 2011, is that correct?
They didn't actually, they pulled, that was within the original plan document was that they would participate at a declining scale through 2011.
Okay. Okay, back on page 6, you've got some, sort of broad-based buckets of projects that were originally set out for TIRZ expenditures.
Yes.
Could you at some point provide us with the list of the specific projects that have been done to date and how much has been spent from the budgeted amounts of
Yes.
the TIRZ, okay? And then, did I hear you correctly when you said that on a go-forward basis, your recommendation, or staff's recommendation, is that the funds generated at this point are going to go into your general fund categories for the support of the general fund type items like public safety, parks, library, code enforcement? Is that correct, or?
Not exactly, it's partially correct. What I recommend is that we do an amount less than 100% contribution, so that instead of 100% of the taxes generated above the base year, but through the increment, instead of 100% going to that, we choose or consider an amount less than 100%, so 75% or 50%, so that there would be additional funds going into the general fund to support those general fund services, but still allocate a portion of the money to the TIRZ.
Okay, so 75% would go to the TIRZ, 25% would go to the general fund?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And those were the two examples that I modeled, was 75%, 50%.
And I guess the example here for people in the community is, if the TIRZ did not exist, funding for the projects that we're trying to do within the TIRZ, like Packery Channel and all of that, would have to come from our fund balances here at the city.
Exactly.
Bond elections, those types of things. So what we're trying to do is generate revenue without having to do those things.
Exactly. So it's the revenue that is generated on the island is then used to fund those projects
Right.
for the island, or the but for, and it's not the general taxpayer that is paying for those improvements on the island through, as to your point, the bond election, or through just basic general fund.
It's actually the businesses and places and people who are investing on the island who are helping pay for that.
Exactly.
So that frees up our tax money to spend in other places throughout the city.
Exactly.
I think that's important for people to understand. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Board Member Hernandez.
Thank you, Chairman. Just quick question, because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Sure.
TIRZ number 3, how much do we get from TIRZ number 3 just for the city?
How much revenue?
Revenue, yes.
I don't know off the top of my head. It is
say it was
100%
like
contribution.
100%. And it comes up, I want to say in 2027 or 2028, but it's like 1.8 or 1.7 million, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at the 50% contribution, you would be somewhat similar?
Yes. Well, and yes, so if you're looking at just the city's line at a 50% contribution, it would be, in 2023, it would be about 1.6 million.
And for TIRZ number 4, what is the city's contribution percentage-wise?
So we're only in the basically second year of the TIRZ, so we don't have a lot of increment. I think this year it's budgeted.
Not dollar amount, percentage.
Percentage, oh, it is a 75%, I apologize, 75% contribution.
It's 100 for the first 10
sorry.
years and 75 after that.
My apologies. First 10 is 100%, yes.
Right, can I just add to that, Councilman? So that was one of the first TIRZ that we did since I've been here. That was the first TIRZ we did since I was here. We recommended a lesser than 100%, so we did 10 years at 100.
That's why I brought it up.
Right, and then the BOCO TIRZ, the second one that was done also since my time here, the BOCO TIRZ was at 75%. So most, if you look at our comparative cities in Texas, they do less than 100%, and so that's why we recommended it for those two TIRZ.
Okay, and one thing that you did not mention in your presentation was how long the extension was for. Can you tell me what you're recommending?
We would recommend another 20 years, but it could be any amount in between 1 to 20, and that would be something that we want to discuss.
Well, you didn't mention it, so I assumed you weren't going to discuss it. But so if it's 20 years, will it have a declining scale similar to what Del Mar did?
We could do that. I mean, that's all part of.
Is that your recommendation or not?
My recommendation would be more of a set percentage. It just makes your forecasting easier, and it would also, if we're looking at longer term projects, we would know what those. We would have a better.
Well, I
source of
mean,
revenue.
if you had a declining scale, you would still know how much money you have coming in, correct? You know, the problem I had with this TIRZ, and I have no, you know, I don't have any problem with TIRZ. It's just the extension doesn't meet the original requirement for a tax reinvestment zone. Generally, you have them in blighted areas, and I understand our attorney and we even got outside counsel to say that you don't have to meet the original requirements in order to extend a TIRZ. But it realistically looks like kind of a slush fund for the island, when, you know, people from the island still, you know, drive on the rest of Corpus Christi city streets and use, you know, Corpus Christi facilities and that kind of stuff. So I you know, so to say that, you know, and the line of questioning Councilman Pusley had mentioned where, you know, we're not taking taxes from the general fund and charging everybody, but we're not gaining those either.
Sure.
So, and the question I brought up when this, you know, when I first got on council a few years back, because I kind of noticed that it was, you know, this was coming up, and I was concerned that we would have some issues along those lines. And I brought up some concerns. So I was thinking if you know, in a majority-minority city, to have a reinvestment zone where you don't really have blighted areas, in an area that is not majority-minority, you could see how it could leave us open for lawsuits. And it doesn't have to be necessarily through the state, but I could see, you know, possibly Dan Manning going to the civil rights organization saying, what are we doing out here on the island? Now, I say that in the sense that it's a possibility. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it's a case, I'm just saying it's a possibility, and that it concerns me that we need to kind of figure out, make sure that this doesn't provide an avenue for that.
Sure.
Well, I still think we need to have some funding here specifically for Packery Channel and some of those aspects. But like I said, I want to make sure we've got ourselves protected from that.
Sure. So one of the things I would say is that, you know, the TIRZ does not cover the whole island. So there is a whole nother kind of half of the island that is not within the TIRZ, that money is going.
Well, I mean, the requirements for TIRZ itself doesn't allow for residential areas, right? It's mainly commercial.
It's,
well, you have some percentage, right?
no more than 30%.
No more than 30%. Right?
Of when you form the TIRZ.
Right, but I would say that would also apply when you extend the term or when you extend the boundaries.
Yeah.
30%.
Okay, so when we say it doesn't apply,
No more than 30% of the area within a TIRZ can be residential unless the TIRZ is done by petition, which this one was not.
Right.
Yeah. So that, and the other thing is that in addition to blight, I mean, you can do it for underdeveloped land, for underdeveloped infrastructure, things along those lines, which what we have found is that there is a lot of undeveloped land still on the island.
well, that's true. There's a lot of undeveloped land in other areas of the city that we don't have TIRZ on.
Sure.
Right? So, and that's not what I'm getting at. You know, there's, you know, we could say that, you know, and I remember when this was formed, there was a thought to put a lot of sidewalks in. I don't recall seeing any sidewalks being done with the TIRZ.
So that is one of the things that we're proposing going forward.
Right, but that was what was proposed 20 years ago, and we never did any of it.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we could be looked at in a negative way.
Sure.
So my recommendation, and I will support a 50% contribution. I think that it's easier to defend. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Wahardo.
And Heather, I think, I have to just correct this, because I don't like anyone ever saying that anything's a slush fund. There is no such thing here. We have council members who, that's offensive, honestly, just to put it bluntly. If you can't support it, you know, it's respected. Don't vote for it. But here's the thing. This is a tool that has been extremely useful, and it has proven, in my opinion, the point of it all, which is economic development, which we want. And it was proven a year ago when Councilman Barrera, he brought up, you know, the TIRZ, which one is it, 4? TIRZ 4, 5, TIRZ 5. So I don't think, you know, any council member can bring forth what they feel, needs to happen for their district. Today, we're talking about a tool that has proven itself, in my opinion, number one. Number two, you guys have gone the extra mile. I understand your, I guess, concern over making certain that, we're treading correctly or, safely, but you guys have done your due diligence. Section 311.007, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct, yes.
Says we are okay
Yes.
moving forward.
Yes.
And there is 20 to 30%, and that's a very, that's just a high guess on my end in terms of land, undeveloped land inside the TIRZ, correct?
There is a large percentage that is still undeveloped, yes.
Okay. If there isn't any other, I mean, your recommendation is 20 years, and I'll let our chair, lead in a little more in the discussion regarding, how we should move it forward. But in terms of whether we should or shouldn't, I'm in complete support of this, and I think it has served a great tool. We've created other ones. This one's been here, 20 years now, right? Because we're
Exactly, yeah.
renewing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. A great presentation on there. And I think as we're moving forward to the board, we're seeing time is starting to, the clock is ticking on there. So just, we've got 10 months even if we don't make the budget with it. And as we're looking at the critical path, so staff has given us some options on there, which these are just staff presented options. There's a lot of different ways you can skin this cat, but we need to come up quickly with how we're going to proceed with the percentages on there, because the other things that were presented today, the projects are going to be dependent on what the cash is. So the first thing we need to decide is what are those percentages going to be. We're at 100%. We saw the 75% option and the 50% option presented to us today with it. But I think it's whether it's in the February or March meeting that we need to decide as a board. Everybody needs to be thinking about it. Board Member Hernandez brought up his suggestion today, so we know where he's coming from on it. And one thing I would like to see from staff giving to the board here, the question on the island, a common phrase I use is the island is a cash cow for the city. With it. So the TIRZ is one part of the island. The islands, last time I looked, have $2.4 billion in taxable value on there. So I think it's important for the board to look at the island as a whole with it, what the input is to the city on ad valorem taxes and how much goes to the TIRZ and how much goes to the general fund right now with it. And I think that'll help our county partners on there with it. And then the last thing on that, on the critical path, knowing where Del Mar sits, I think is very important to us too. So if we can be focusing on those areas and this board be thinking on going forward what we want to do, the extension time, personally I support 20 years with it. But then as the mayor brought up, there's a lot of undeveloped land. The TIRZ we've seen at island properties, the island, when we see the valuations this next year, they're going to be through the roof with it. So you have very conservative projections. Thank you for those conservative projections. But as we go forward, that we need to make sure we have enough money on the critical things like the maintenance of the Packery Channel, what this TIRZ was originally founded for with it. Okay. Member Pusley.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you looking for a motion?
No, this is discussion item.
Just discussion only? Okay, all right. So, Peter, or Heather, I guess you can answer this. So currently we have 5 different tax investment zones?
4 active.
4?
4 active,
Okay.
yes.
So are any of those operating at less than 100%?
The number 5 is at a 75% contribution.
Okay.
Number 4 is 100% for the first 10 years, and
All
then
right,
75%.
Wait a minute,
Sorry.
no, don't get ahead. 5 is, which
70
area does that cover?
That is BOCO, the crosstown SBID development there.
Okay.
It's 100% residential development,
100%
Councilman.
residential?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But it's and it's at 100%?
It's at 75%.
75%? Okay. And number 4 is
Is North
North
Beach
Beach? Okay, that's North Beach, and it's 100%.
for the first 10 years,
Okay, first 10 years. And then what about the second 10? Have they just-
75% for the second 10 years.
75, first 10 years. Okay, and then 3 is downtown?
Downtown,
And it's
100%,
100% for the 20 years,
yes.
okay? And this one, we have always operated it at 100% for the 20-year period,
Yes, sir.
okay? And what's 1?
TIRZ number 1 was the original TIRZ. It was done in the 1980s, 1990s. It paid for the Texas State Aquarium. So
Okay.
the boundary
And
of it was North Beach and
And
downtown.
it's gone?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. And the other taxing entities can elect to participate at whatever percentage they want to, even if we select 100%?
That is correct.
Okay, okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, yes. And BOCO actually also has, not only does it have a limitation of the contribution, but it also has a dollar amount that will only contribute, no matter when that occurs, up to a maximum of the 20 years at 75% or up to the dollar amount. And so, and that is a good point on all of these. You can slice and dice TIRZs however you want to. You can put contribution dollar amount limits, you can put time limits, you can put percentage, there's a lot of different things you can do. And so it really is up to the board to make a recommendation to council on how you feel best to slice and dice the TIRZ. There's a lot of options there.
Member Hernandez.
Thank you. Okay, the reason I brought up the items I did, it's not to be the Grinch or anything like that, even though I seem to play that role sometimes. But I want to make sure that we're covering our bases.
Sure.
Right? We still need, Packery Channel, I see a lot of value in it. It gives us, water communication, which is important, since we do have somewhat of a closed bay. So it's important to have that. And, looking at what maintenance would be, dredging on an occasional basis, it's important. But ultimately, at some point, the TIRZ has to end, right? We can't go on in perpetuity, similar to TIRZ number 1. It served its purpose and it ended. So it's one of those things where we should look at the opportunity that way, that, it covered a lot of good things on the island. And, but, I was thinking about how in District 5, we don't have a TIRZ, but we grew larger than the rest of the city. And, so just because you have some undeveloped land, just like we have in District 5, it doesn't mean the development won't come.
Sure.
Even if it's not necessarily incentivized. And we also have different tools like 380 agreements and those types of things that we can, utilize, similar to what we did with Schlitterbahn. So I don't want to sit here and say that this is a negative towards the island. No, I want to make sure that we cover our bases and that we're thinking about possibilities of what could happen if we're looked at in a certain way.
Sure.
So, like I said, I recommend a 50% term and maybe even a declining scale over the 20 years. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any further questions?
Okay, thanks.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Commissioner Chesney.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you loud and clear.
IT,
Thank
can we
you.
get them on screen?
Oh, hold on. I'll try. How's that? You see me?
Not yet.
No, but I think IT's working on it. Hold on.
It's connecting. It says it's. There we go. There you go. Can you see me twice now? Can you see me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick comments in regards, and what I'd like to do is have you come make the presentation to the Commissioners Court. I'm one member of this TIRZ board and can't speak for the entire court. I can certainly say that I support this myself, and I also echo Chairman Smith's comment about extending it for 20 years, but I think it would be important to have this presentation made to the entire Commissioners Court so that they can see it and start digesting this, because obviously they're going to be asked to make a financial commitment to this. And I don't want to dwell too much. There were a couple of comments made that seemed to me that if there are still legal questions, those need to be asked in executive session. And I'm often uncomfortable discussing people's legal concerns in public. So if those are still out there, then I would certainly suggest that be made forward. And lastly, not to make too big a deal of the word, but I don't in any way, shape, or form think this was a slush fund for the island. Quite the contrary. And the negative connotation of that term is pretty significant. And quite the contrary, I think it's been a fund that's helped do things that the city would have had to probably do otherwise. A lot of the projects were funds set aside to help the city grow that island. I believe I was involved with this when we throughout the years when I was on the city council. I can't remember if I was there when we set it up. It's been a long time. But I do think at the same time, this has been it served the purpose exactly what it was meant to be, which was to have funds available for projects needed for the growth and development of that island. And so it has served the exact purpose that it is set out to do. And some of those projects, quite frankly, the county wouldn't have responsibility for, maybe most or all of those projects, but still, I appreciate the fact and consider being a partner in this very important. Nevertheless, so I do think it's important that we focus on that, and everybody gets to say what everybody wants to say about anything, freedom of speech. But when those terms get thrown around, I don't want any affiliation with them, and I think that we should at least proceed with caution when using those kinds of terms, because that insinuates that someone has done something wrong on the island, and those folks have done nothing wrong. They have used those funds for what they were purposed for. So I think it's a good I think it's a good TIRZ. I think we should extend it for as long as we can, realistically. But again, back to my opening statement about I really want to set you up to come do the presentation for the Commissioners Court, because it's an easy one for me. I represent the island. I think the county judge will be on board with some form of it. I don't know. And I'm going to digest all this that you presented today too, and kind of start crunching the numbers over at our place. But I appreciate the opportunity to be heard, and look forward to being over there this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Chesney. Nice ride you got there. So to his comment, so can we go before Commissioners Court?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll work with the Commissioners Court to schedule that meeting.
So you'll work with Commissioner Chesney and Judge Canales to...
Yes, we will.
Great. Okay.
Just call my office. Just call my office, and I'll get it on the agenda.
Okay. Judge Canales?
Yes, apologize. I'm having trouble with the icon this afternoon. I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., where I've been working on concepts and funding for Bob Hall Pier. And as I see the good presentation that was presented just moments ago, it dawns on me that Bob Hall Pier seems to meet all the criteria for public infrastructure and public improvements in one shape or another. And I also support the TIRZ and support its reauthorization. I do think we should have a good conversation about the 75% or 50%, see what's in the best interest of both the city and the county. But food for thought, there is a real opportunity here. If you were to give the people a 20-year time frame, you could marry that 20-year time frame with the potential borrowing of dollars through, let's say, a federal agency that I'm betting right now. I don't want to tell you what it is and then not have it come through, but I believe we found a funding source up here that would allow a borrowing and a slow payback, very de minimis over time, that the TIRZ would support. You would see economic development. You would see land use and management, which is very important. Development is awesome. Land use management is equally as awesome for an environmental sensitive area like we have on Padre Island. So I think for many reasons you would find a very friendly conversation at the county with regards to this, and happy to set that up. But I think that the county's participation could also be married with a lot of potential infrastructure. In other words, we should concentrate, as we've done in the past, with areas like Packery Channel, and now turn our sights to the iconic Bob Hall Pier that could really use some dollars now, or at least the commitment of dollars in the future. Anyway, I'm happy to set this on the March agenda. If that's not soon enough, you'll have to let us know. But I think that there should be at least a few weeks so that you can come and make individual presentations. Allow Heather to do that, and then of course it'll be primed and ready. We have a new port manager. She didn't even know about this meeting. So having said that, a little bit of prep will go a long way, and then we can look towards a March, presentation on our agenda. And Greg, I'd welcome your comments and thoughts, but I just reviewed, our documents. I just reviewed what Heather gave, and it seems that Bob Hall Pier infrastructure, again, certain pieces of it could definitely meet this criteria. As they say, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
And can I just add, so, if the board does decide that that's something that they would like to have included in that project of financing plan, we would have to, I don't believe that it is quite within the boundaries. I think the boundaries stop along the water's edge area, and so we would need to adjust the boundaries of the TIRZ to include the Bob Hall Pier.
Okay. Thank you.
But as you pointed out, Heather, in your presentation, it's nice that we have that flexibility. It allows for the addition. But is it to the mean high tide? Is that what it is? You said it's to the water's edge.
I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to pull the meets and bounds to see exactly where it is. I'm not sure exactly where that boundary is, but I know it doesn't go out into there, I think.
Right. But for example, our parking lot will be behind the dunes. So that's a great example of infrastructure and public improvements that probably meets the jurisdictional boundaries, just as an example. And then our ADA ramp, for example, is another opportunity. I can think of others that are not to the water's edge that would still be public improvements. But I agree with you. You should include the whole kit and caboodle, because we're building this pier for the next 75 years. We're going to have terrific skin in the game, but to build it back stronger and more resilient, and in keeping with our growth for the Gulf Coast, it's been predicted by the Texas 2036 model, we need to build what we have seen. And there's an easy pathway. This is but one more tool. And I think if we're going to have buy-in for 20 years, we need to get a return on investment. This is an example of how you can share that with the community, because this is what they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Pusley.
Yeah, I've often wondered why the original TIRZ, I know the original scope of this tax reinvestment zone was to get Packery Channel built, and I understand that, but I've often wondered why they didn't include Bob Hall Pier, and I just wonder if the ISAC committee has an opinion on that.
Don't know. We'll ask that question on there. Bring it in the discussion.
Well, we have their president here. Could we ask him?
We're running real short on time. I'd really like to get into the Packery Channel maintenance if we're finished with questions. We've only we're 30 minutes away from a council meeting.
Okay.
And two.
We can get you something in writing, Councilman. We'll do a follow-up memo. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Jeff, you're up. Next item is Packery Channel maintenance.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. Jeff Edmonds, Director of Engineering Services. I've got a few slides. This is really intended to just spur some conversation about the ongoing maintenance responsibilities on Packery Channel. So I've got a few maps just to help orient folks. The Packery Channel actually is about 3 miles in length and goes all the way from the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway all the way past the jetties. They refer to, in the operations manual, it's a little confusing because we have some different nomenclature in our construction documents for the repair, but according to the operations, maintenance, repair, and replacement and rehabilitation manual, Reach 1 is the portion on the Gulf side, and Reach 2 is the portion west and north of 361. I've also indicated there the location of the new bridge that we're building, that when it is complete and the canals are complete, it's going to provide navigation connectivity from all the canal system over in the bottom left-hand side of the slide to Lake Padre and out to the Packery Channel, without having to do what they have to do currently, which is go around to the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway and enter the Packery Channel that way. This is a blow-up of the Lake Padre Packery Channel area, just indicating the relation of the bridge to Lake Padre and Packery Channel. This is the manual that I was referring to. This was something that we agreed to in the project cooperation agreement, that we would follow the requirements of this manual. I think we're going to need to revisit that, particularly after we get done with the repairs. Might be a good time to kind of hit the reset button and make sure we're doing the things that we need to do. Here's some key points I'd like to make. As everyone knows, we've got the Hurricane Harvey repairs that are currently underway. The channel was last dredged in 2013, and I really hate to disagree with Heather. I'm not sure I can say that you've got enough funding in that dredging account to dredge it twice. Now, it cost $2 million the last time we did it. Of course, that was several years ago, so I'm sure there's been some cost escalation.
And Mr. Edmonds, we just did 40,000 yards in the marina, and cost of that contract was 1.6 million?
I'm not going to
Okay.
disagree with you. Of course,
what I'm bringing up, we've had huge inflation on there, 40,000 yards for about 1.6 million, and when we do a dredge on the Packery, it's 250,000 yards.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an apples to orange comparison, because
Yeah.
we're having to take that all the way over to the port's dredge material placement area.
But we could easily use the full $4 million on our next dredge.
It's possible.
It's
It is-
possible.
It is
Okay.
possible. The volumes, I think, are going to be pretty similar. We know it's in need of dredging. There's areas that are shallower than what's indicated in this operations manual right now. But from a sequencing standpoint, our consultant was recommending, let's get the repair done and then do the dredge. So we're probably going to start that to where you'll go right out of the repair into the dredging. Another point that I think is important to make, as you know, when we dredged previously and when we did the original construction, the material that was suitable was used to nourish the beach. Now, obviously, with the original construction, that was a massive volume of material that was used to nourish the beach. When we dredged in 2012, 2013, much less volume. The one point that I'd like to make is that is dispel the notion that the Packery Channel is going to be a perpetual source of all the beach nourishment material that is going to be needed. It's certainly going to help. It might be somewhere between half or 2/3 what we need to restore the beach profile to what it was immediately after the construction. So the channel sand volume is insufficient to meet the beach nourishment volume requirements, and so Go forward, we're going to need a long-term plan to make up for that deficit with some other sources, probably offshore sources that you would mine and bring in to nourish the beach. So developing the future project plan, that's something we need to think about as well. And that was really all I had. I believe this was intended to sort of start the conversation.
Okay, so what depth are we supposed to maintain that channel to?
The reach 1 is supposed to
Yeah.
be maintained to 8.65 and reach 2 to 7.
Okay. And board members, we're seeing a real change right now on there. Construction is underway in the Lake Padre area that's going to bring bigger boats in there. And right now, the channel's been used by smaller boats. Their height's restricted because of Park Road 22 bridge at 22 feet, and then the internal bridges at 15 feet. But as Lake Padre develops out, we'll have much larger boats where depth becomes important on there. We haven't been doing a good job of maintaining that channel, but if Lake Padre, if the island's going to develop like we originally envisioned to it, where we have these larger offshore boats coming in there, much more of a Port Aransas style, we've got to follow what we're supposed to do at that 8-foot depth, 8.65 foot depth. And, our maintenance cycles, we've been using the channel is a mine for beach sand on there with it, but, okay, we don't have enough built up, we can't maintain, or we don't dredge because of that. But we're going to get to the point where we're getting hundreds of millions of dollars investment in this Lake Padre area. To put it in a little bit of perspective, there's more acreage in Lake Padre undeveloped than there is in North Beach. So just this one portion of Lake Padre has more ad valorem potential, this undeveloped ground, than North Beach does. And it's sitting right there at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico. And there's some critical things that needed to be done. The Seagate to going into Lake Padre to meet the Corps of Engineers by the private developer needed to be altered. That has been done. Underground utilities and streets are being worked on right now. So we are going to see this undeveloped Lake Padre section total pushing a couple of hundred acres, 100 and something acres of developable land on it. And that's why we're sitting here talking about this right now. We have to do a better job of maintaining this channel, which is paid for out of the TIRZ funds. And I think we need to take a deep dive at dredging cost on there. So we're looking at 2013 data as we're moving the needle forward on what funding we're going to be needing on there. What are our 2022 prices? We know what inflation's doing, those kind of things. So I hope, Mr. Edmonds, you can do a little bit of informational gathering on this, because this is a very key portion of our financing plan. That is the start of what the TIRZ is for, is maintaining that channel. Okay.
Well, one of the things in this manual that I think we've been somewhat remiss on is it states that immediately, if you have an area where you have shoaling that exceeds that allowable amount, that you will immediately go in there and conduct some targeted dredging. And we haven't really done that. We've been blessed by the fact that they thought you were going to have to dredge the channel every couple of years when it was originally constructed, and it's proven to be need much less. It's very self-scouring. When you have north winds come through, it does some of the dredging for you. You also lose that sand that you can't put on the beach. But I think going forward, we need to do a better job of staying on top of that. And when you have shoaling that might create issues to navigation, do smaller contracts to do targeted dredging to remove those.
Well, and we need to develop a cost model for that. So going forward, Member Lerma.
Thank you, Chairman. the comments that you just made about North Beach and the island weren't necessary for you to be competing. The city is not competing North Beach to the island. It's never been brought up that way, but now I know why you don't support North Beach, and now I know why the island people are going to push for all these new projects and the tours to be expanded, because they're completely against the North Beach development area. You don't want any other part of the city of Corpus Christi to be developed. And it's very-
Mr.
let me
Lerma,
finish.
I'm going to have to.
Let me finish. Mr. Chairman, you made
that
some
is-
comments.
is
and I-
incorrect.
That is correct. So you just made those comments that you compared North Beach to the island, and that should have never been done that way. I have supported the island. I have supported that tours from the beginning that I've gone on here, because I support growth in this city. I don't pick and choose the areas of growth. It's our job as a council to vote what's best for this city and the citizens of this city. And you just made a comment that should not have been made, sir, and you need to apologize to the North Beach residents, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, I seconded the motion for the creation of the North Beach TIRZ on there. I was instrumental in getting that TIRZ formed.
I don't have any issues with that,
Okay.
Chairman. I made my comments to the
Okay.
comments that you just
Thank you.
referred to, sir.
I was just trying to bring it in a relative. Like you, I support growth across this city. I've supported all of the TIRZ in this city. I've supported every growth initiative that we have. So if somebody
Stop
is
comparing the
offended
two
by-
areas, because it's
by
totally
that,
different, sir. They're totally different.
Okay.
I've never said that the island needs to be like North Beach. I've never brought that up, sir.
Okay.
That's all I'm asking from you, sir.
Okay.
Don't compare them.
Well, I apologize if you took my, as a slight on North Beach. North Beach is an important part of the
I
city.
accept your apology,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. With that done, Board
Chairman?
Member Pusley.
Okay, real quickly, Jeff, again, what's the objective depths of Reach 1 and Reach 2?
Reach 2 is 8.65. I'm sorry, Reach 1 is 8.65. Reach 2 is 7.
8.65, and Reach 2 is 7. Okay. And Reach 1 is, would y'all bring that
That's the portion from 361 out to the Gulf.
out to the Gulf? That's Reach 1. Okay, so it is slightly deeper than the other part. Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just a quick question for Jeff. So I'm curious on the beach renourishment, and I've been a little concerned that we haven't been able to get in the same sync with regards to a sediment incident management plan with the Corps. Do you view the beach renourishment as something you're going to pursue, like through the KEPRA program, or what are you thinking there? Because they're real particular about these grains, these fines that we use, and we just executed this letter of intent. I'm just wondering if that's the plan, maybe we should be, doing that in a coordinated way.
I would say, at this point, we don't really have a plan. I'd say it's more recognition that we have a problem, that we're going to dredge the Packery Channel, and we're going to put that material on the beach, which is going to significantly help, but it's going to be about 150,000 cubic yards or so short of where we'd ideally like to be. And so over time, your Packery Channel dredging is not going to be able to keep up with your beach nourishment needs. So I guess
Right.
the point is
Yeah.
we need a plan.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my point, is that we need a plan, and well, number one, you have to do that with either the Corps or the GLO, depending on what this permit says. But I would really like us to sit down and work on that, because we're in the process of finalizing that plan, our plan with the county. Why not, do it together? That it just doesn't make any sense not to have that done together. And that beach renourishment is absolutely key, but they require a lot of feasibility studies first before you're even eligible. Let's say just what you said is true. Let's say you don't have enough dredge material to renourish your beach. In order to have the compatible fines, you have to have their permission as to what you're going to use. And typically that comes from working with the GLO. So again, I learned this the hard way, that our county did not have any kind of a plan, and so we've instituted it. So ours is considered pending now with the Corps for sediment incident management. And I think that if this is the plan from y'all's part, you should join our efforts immediately. That's all.
Thank you. Any further questions to Mr. Edmonds? Okay, thank you. The next item is a presentation on the mobility plan. And you got to talk really fast, Dan. We need to conclude this.
I'll go quick. I think I can do it 2 minutes.
Okay.
Good morning. Dan McGinn, Director of Planning Department. This next item is just a briefing on the Padre Island Mobility Plan. This was a project that was identified during the development of the Area Development Plan, which was adopted last year and was recently recommended for TIRZ funding by the ISAC at their last meeting. And so in working with the island, we did a lot of public engagement. We had a survey that went out, and so just kind of highlighting just basically some infrastructure kind of deficiencies on the island, and of course, walkability, bikeability, and then of course the lack of kind of a golf court network was a high priority for the residents out there. And so what this island mobility plan can do, it will evaluate the multimodal transportation options on the island and identify the routing, where they should be, and then more specifically, what they should look like, and the design, how wide, one-way, two-way kind of a thing. So that would look at the pedestrian, biking, golf carts, again, the routing, and then more specifically, the actual design. And of course, this was section 1.10 within the plan. And then again, we have, in all our projects, we have the short, mid, and long-term kind of project prioritization in the back of the document. As you can see here, this was a project that was approved for funding within the first 5 years if we could identify a source. These next few slides, I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the challenges that the island deals with. Of course, we have Park Road 22 that really kind of functions like a highway. It's a barrier, from moving. We have a lot of residential over here. They have golf carts and biking and walkability, and trying to connect them to the different businesses along the corridor. And of course, getting over here to the seawall and some of the facilities that are there. So it's really that lack of infrastructure on Park Road 22. You can't bike, you can't walk, you can't take a golf cart down there because of the speeds. And so a real challenge, and if you've gone out to dinner out there, you see these parking lots that are completely full. You have cars in the ditches on the road. So, hopefully, by creating a network, a lot of those trips could be done by bike, walking, golf carts. So hopefully would alleviate some of those issues that we see within that corridor. Just highlighting some of these, we kind of have some makeshift paths that have kind of popped up. This is the intersection at Whitecap and Padre Island Boulevard. So, these are just kind of dirt paths that people have kind of developed on their own, really, because you can only cross at Whitecap, and then there's kind of an alley called Paper Street, and so, into the Ace Hardware complex, and then again, down to the Dollar General. Again, these are makeshift, these aren't organized, these aren't necessarily safe paths that have been developed. They just kind of occurred naturally. Pelican Lounge here, and they have kind of their own back way in. You can see the kind of the tires marks that have occurred, and it's because people can't use Park Road 22 with their golf carts. And so they've had to find these kind of alternative ways to get into the site. I do have a good example, though. We have one site that we worked with. They had a road that they wanted to close here. We worked with them, and we really wanted to find a way to get access for the bikers, pedestrians, golf carts from the rear, but still, maybe we get rid of that road. So we worked with them to develop this kind of golf cart and bike access to the rear of the property, which I think has been real successful for them. People can go to the grocery store. There's a restaurant, bar in that area. So that's what we hope the plan will have more success stories like that, and how we can build out that network on the island. So, next steps, this was just a briefing, but next steps, I think this could be part of, if they wanted to move forward, part of a, an update or amendment to the project and financing plan. So with that, I can take questions.
Board Member Hernandez?
And this is more for the chair and for the staff. This is the second presentation we got where we didn't have the actual presentation before the meeting. I've made my complaints to the city manager about this, but I think we should have gotten this ahead of time so we could have reviewed it beforehand, so I could ask good questions. Now, I couldn't even see any of the, static or stats that you had in there because didn't have a chance to review it. So if we can make sure that we get these presentations beforehand so we can review them, so we can have good questions. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. In the interest of time, while we're talking about, this is a mobility plan. It's not about cars. It's about alternate forms of transportation, golf carts, biking, these other kind of methods on there with it. We're seeing in Port Aransas that you have a lot of congestion with it. We've got 3 large developments that are in design right now on the island. We're really behind the curve on this plan. This is being able to get the future right-of-ways, how we're going to move these multimodal forms of transportation with it. So Dan brought it as a discussion item to bring up to the board that we need to be going forward with it on there, and I hope you said we have some alternates. It's critically needed with these 3 major developments going on. How do we tie these 3 together so people can walk between them, they can bike between them, they can take their golf carts between them? We, this TIRZ board, have contributed $6 million to a bridge that accommodates that, but we don't have the plan on each side of the bridge. So I'm going to encourage staff to move forward sooner rather than later on this. I know we have the chair of ISAC here, that it's high on their list with it, but with everything going on, it's something we can't wait for. But thank you very much, Mr. McGinn. In the interest of time, I'm going to be forced to adjourn this meeting. I'm sure we'll be meeting next March and be on a much more aggressive meeting schedule as we see the things we have to do. So thank everybody for coming with it, and see you in March. This meeting is adjourned.